Welcome to my weekly live stream. I'm Kristine Weber. So today I'm going to be talking about new research and kind of some exciting stuff, actually. So glad you're here. Thank you for joining me, and we'll get into it in just a moment. I want to first, I'm going to tell you. First, I feel like my live streams have turned into a book report or something, or book club. So I hope that's okay. But there's always so much happening, in terms of research. I get reports from something called Ovid Alerts, which is from a librarian at a medical library where I work. And I don't work at the library, but the library is at the facility where I work. And the reports, typically I used to get like 7 or 8 or 10 different research studies that had been published about yoga. And so lately I've been getting more like 40, 50, which is pretty exciting. So anyway, the latest study that just came out that I'm going to be talking about today, if my cat will get off of it, is this study. It's called The Effects of Yoga on Thalamic Gaba Immunobutyric Acid, Mood, and Depression, Analysis of 2 Randomized Control Trials. Oh, there you go. Can you see that there? Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to be, there we go. Yeah, and this study was led by Chris Streeter. Chris Streeter's pretty exciting person in terms of her research with yoga. You really want to say hello to everybody, huh? Let me just move my cat. Sorry. There we go. So anyway, her research. She's done a lot of research on this stuff in the brain called Gaba. So I want to talk about that today, what her research means, and I also want to talk about the implications of this article because it's actually, I think it's groundbreaking. I think this is going to be a major. It's going to signal a major shift in terms of the use of yoga. Clinically and in medical settings. So Chris Streeter's at Boston University. She has been doing studies on yoga, and what she studies primarily is the effect of yoga on something in the brain that's called GABA, which I just mentioned the long name for it, gamma aminobutyric acid. So GABA is the brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. So what that means is it helps us to calm down when we feel, hyped up, overstimulated, hyped up. And so, even if you like Google GABA, you'll find all these supplements, like, because people are taking GABA now. I don't know how they make it, but they're taking GABA now as a way to help, deal with anxiety, help calm anxiety. So what they found is that low levels of GABA are associated not only with anxiety, but also with depression. And actually, what the researchers say is that the primary sort of underlying cause of depression is that overstimulation of the autonomic nervous system, right? So it's too much anxiety, and then the nervous system kind of crashes and defaults into depression. So there's a strong correlation between anxiety and depression, and particularly in one form of depression, which is called major depressive disorder. It often often anxiety is part of that disorder. So you have depression, you have anxiety, you have PTSD symptoms, alcohol dependence. All of those conditions have been associated with low levels of GABA in the brain. And so Streeter measures GABA in the thalamus, which is a particularly interesting place, I think, because the thalamus is where we mediate all our senses. So the sense of touch, taste, sight, and hearing all have to get mediated through the thalamus before they get up into the sensory motor cortex and also interface with front brain systems. The one sense of smell that doesn't go through the thalamus is, the one sense that doesn't go through the thalamus, I gave it away, is a sense of smell. At any rate, so she's looking at GABA in the thalamus as a way to understand if somebody as a way to help us measure the depressive symptoms. And so it's been demonstrated that people with major depressive disorder have lower levels of GABA in the thalamus, well, in the brain. I don't know if it's specifically in the thalamus. And what her studies showed, she did 2 randomized control trials. Randomized control trials are the gold standard of research, and she did 2 of them. And in both of them, she's showing an increase in GABA in people with major depressive disorder. So this is exciting. So what she did was take those studies and then create this theory around, in this article that just recently was published, a theory around it. And the theory she calls it's the mechanism of how yoga works. So the theory is called Vagal GABA theory. So our Vagal GABA theory is telling us why yoga works for depression. And basically she says there's these 2 major mechanisms that are going on at the same time. One is the GABA levels in the brain. It's a neurotransmitter, so that chemical, giving us that understanding of what's going on chemically. And the other piece is what's going on with the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve is the largest nerve. It goes on both sides with 2 of them. Largest nerve of the parasympathetic nervous system. And most of the function of the vagus nerve is the afferents are sending messages up to the brain to tell you how your body's doing out there. There's numerous studies that have shown that yoga increases heart rate variability, which is how they measure the vagal tone, meaning how good is your vagus nerve working, right? So she says these 2 things together are the mechanisms that underlie why yoga works. Now, why is this important? Like, we've known this, but why is this important? Well, it gives us a theory instead of just, sort of speculating like yoga makes you relax, it makes you feel better. That's sort of the things that we hear in yoga classes, but she's giving like a concrete scientific theory. And the next piece that's really exciting is underneath this is that because there's this concrete scientific theory, because there's these mechanisms that she has helped to identify, what she says at the end of the article, and if I can get my cat off it, I'll read it to you. What she says at the end of the article here is that now we have this theory, right? And she says, these results indicate potential benefits of specific yoga postures and breathing practices as monotherapy. Monotherapy, that's a psychiatric term for one treatment, right? So she says monotherapy or augmentation to other treatments to reduce anxiety and depression in major depressive disorder. So she's saying yoga could be monotherapy for major depressive disorder. That's groundbreaking, in my opinion. And this is the study that you can take to a medical center, that you can take to a mental health clinic, that you can take to public health, community mental health, and say, like, I've got this. I can do this. Now, again, to give her, all the credit that's due here. She's not talking about all kinds of yoga. She's not talking about any of the nonsense that goes on out there. She's talking about specifically Iyengar yoga that used back bends, inversions, and shavasana, and with highly trained Iyengar teachers. That's her thing. And the other piece to it is that they used what's called coherent breathing. Now, coherent breathing has been researched quite a bit. And coherent breathing is essentially breathing into 6 counts and out to 6 counts. You could be a little bit, there's a little window. It's 5.5 to 6.5 seconds on the inhale and the exhale. Or I could be wrong. It's 5.5 to 6.5 breaths per minute. That's exactly what it is. So sorry, it's a little off, but it's around 6 counts in, 6 counts out. Coherent breathing has been rather, as I've said, it's been well studied, and it's been well studied because it's part of the mechanisms of, or part of the techniques of something called heart math. But, it's just a very traditional ratio. It's a 1:1 ratio. It's a very common ratio. What we know in terms of human breathing, and I learned this from respiratory therapy nurse, is that human beings usually breathe out longer than they breathe in. And we know scientifically, we know in terms of the yoga tradition, that the inhale tends to be more energizing and it raises your heart rate a bit, and the exhale tends to be more relaxing and it lowers your heart rate. So think about this. If most human beings usually exhale when you're on that autonomic control of the breath, if most human beings usually exhale longer, often twice as long as they inhale, what would happen if you make the inhale and the exhale equal? You'd be energizing the system a little bit, right? So they used a slightly energizing, but I would say safe ratio breath, plus some back bends, some inversions, and shavasana. That's not unusual. I mean, most of us who are in yoga therapy or just, involved in yoga beyond the fitness benefits of it know that back bends, inversions, shavasana are going to be useful in terms of activating the parasympathetic nervous system, the relaxation response, right? But and this is typical of research, they talk about their specific protocol, like this is the protocol, and therefore this is the thing that is going to get funding most likely if it gets out there in terms of insurance or in terms of being taken seriously by the medical community. So we'll see what happens with it. It's still really exciting. I don't teach Iyengar or yoga, but I think it's very exciting for those of us in the yoga world to see this kind of research come out. So just a quick recap review. And was there anything else I wanted to talk about? No, those were the main things. Quick recap review is that this article talks about the mechanisms underlying yoga that help to address major depressive disorder, including increasing Gaba in the brain, particularly at the thalamus, which is a part of the brain that helps to mediate the senses. It does other things, but that's one of the main things. It talks about how yoga also increases heart rate variability and vagal tone. And then it gives a specific yoga protocol. And at the end of the article, the research suggests that yoga may be considered possibly a monotherapy for major depressive disorder, which is, again, psychiatric speak for this is the drug you use for this condition, right? And the drug in this case would be this yoga protocol, and that the protocol that they used is an Iyengar protocol that includes inversions, back bends, and shavasana, plus coherent breathing, 5 counts in, 6 counts in, 6 counts out breath. So I hope that is helpful for you. Research articles like this are often, not always, but often available, and this one's available freely on the web. I feel free to grab I can put the link of it actually in when I finish, so you can feel free to download it and read it for yourself. It's actually, I read a lot of research, and this one not too bad. Like a lot of research studies, I'm like, I need help, but this one's pretty easy to understand. So I recommend reading it and brushing up on your research, particularly if you're working with people with depression, if you're working in settings other than just one-on-one yoga therapy or yoga classes, but if you're working in more medical settings, these kinds of articles are super helpful. So thank you everybody for being here. Thank you all of you who commented. Does anybody have questions before I go? I'm just going to like all the comments, and I will add the comment of the URL for the article, and then and check out my blog, by the way. And then a couple of things I have coming up tonight. I'll be presenting for Yoga U. I'm doing my my really fun yoga detox workshop for Yoga U tonight. So I'm excited to be doing that again for such wonderful people. I love working with Yoga U. I'll leave the URL here. And there's a free interview that Eva did with me a couple of days ago, so I can put that up too. And I'll see you next Thursday. We'll see what new exciting things come out in the yoga research world before next Thursday, or maybe I'll talk about another book or something. But let me know if you have topics that you want me to talk about, and let me know. And it's great to have you here. Namaste.